welcome. The Maryland School for the Blind, in collaboration with the Maryland Transition Help Desk, is happy to put on this webinar. I'm Conchita Hernandez, the Maryland Blind and Low Vision Specialist. This webinar will be recorded and posted to the Maryland School for the Blind's YouTube page. We held a session in January on accessible Word documents that this is posted, and the presentation from January is posted there as well. You should have all received a copy of the presentation for today's session if you registered prior to yesterday. If you did not, feel free to email me, or you can email the email that appears on your registration information. You can feel free to type in your questions into the chat box as they come up during the presentation, and we will also have a Q&A session at the end. You will be able to get a certificate of attendance for today's session, and I will also put the link to that in the chat box. So before we get started, we're going to have a quick poll to get some information from you all. So I am launching the poll now. If you cannot access the poll directly on your screen, feel free to write it into the chat box. The first question is, do you work in Maryland? Yes or no? The second question is, what is your role? And it's multiple choice. Are you a TVI, related service provider, general education teacher, administrator, parent, or other? Awesome. Thank you so much for your responses. I'm going to give it a tiny bit more. All right. And it looks like we have a lot of people that are coming from outside of Maryland. And we have a lot of TVIs, some service providers. We don't have any general ed teachers. We have administrators, parents, and other. And I'm seeing that you are putting into the chat box that information. So that's wonderful. Special education teacher, great. Well, welcome to all of you. We really hope this is helpful. And I am now going to hand it over to Carlton and her team.
Great. Thank you. Welcome to Make and Take Accessible Slide Presentations, Secrets Revealed. As Conchita mentioned, this is brought to you by the Maryland School for the Blind and conducted in collaboration with the Maryland Bridges Help Desk. There's some more information about the help desk, and I'll share that at the end, some contact information. We are a free resource for Maryland transition age blind and low vision students, their families, and their educators. And now for some reason, my slide presentation doesn't want to let me. There we are. Presenters. I'm Carlton N. Cook Walker. Carlton is fine. I am program director for the Maryland Bridges Help Desk, and I'm also a certified teacher of students with blindness and low vision. With me is the fabulous Triva Olivero. I'll ask Triva to say hi, and although Triva is a certified teacher of students with blindness and low vision.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Teacher of blind students, and you offer contracted services via distance technology too, don't you, Triva?
Yes, I do. I do offer contracted services. I wear a few different hats, and I actually teach in any state. So if there's a student who in Maryland who needs contract services, I may be able to provide them.
Yeah, Triva is fabulous. She actually taught my blind child when my child was in high school. So I had a lot of choices, and
I did, and we worked with PowerPoint.
Yeah, my child didn't like PowerPoints, I don't think. Oh, well. Objectives. Today, we're going to learn how to make slide presentations accessible as they are created. We're going to learn how to identify and remediate inaccessibility issues in existing slide presentations. And we hope that you gain confidence in your competence to create and use slide presentations for in-person, hybrid, or distance instruction. Okay. First thing, language used. There's a discussion in the community about person first versus identity first language. This would be a person with autism versus an autistic person. I use that because I took these quotes from an article that is referenced at the bottom of the slide. For people who prefer person first language, they are recognizing that the human comes first and the disability comes second. People who prefer identity first language, it says it's a choice about empowerment. Disability is nothing to be ashamed of. Assistant Professor Laura Dudley noted that generally it's the people themselves who prefer to be called autistic people or identity first language, and caregivers and professionals who prefer people with autism or people with blindness, low vision. This varies from disability to disability. In the blindness community, there's a pretty strong push toward identity first. So call me a blind person, call me a low vision person. That is a fairly strong push in the community, but it does vary from person to person. Just as we identify ourselves, I would say I'm a white person. People would say you're a Caucasian person. Or you're a person with Western European background. Whatever it is, I think that it's really important to be respectful of the individual who is self-identifying. So we share this to be upfront. And if you have heard person first, and say, why on earth is she saying blind person? This is why. What does accessibility mean? Accessibility is, some people might say you can define it in many ways. But what accessibility means in this presentation is that the materials can be used efficiently, effectively, and sustainably with regular and accessible technology. There are standards and there are references to those in Maryland materials, as well as in the presentation on Word from January, but the Web Accessibility Guidelines talk about POUR, P-O-U-R. They need to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. We are primarily focusing on the perceivable part today. Please note, this is really, really important. Accessibility does not impact the content of materials at all. No content. We're talking about an accommodation, not a modification. Why must materials be accessible? Well, it's legally required. And it's legally required not just for, excuse me, I'm sorry, I skipped over a part. I want to talk, when I talked about it's not an accommodation, it's a modification. Sometimes people say, well, we can do a read aloud. A read aloud could be an accommodation instead of accessibility. That's not appropriate. The reason it's not an appropriate accommodation, it's actually a modification, because it separates the student from interaction with the text. Screen readers, you might say, well, but screen readers are reading to the kids, so what's the difference between the computer reading it to the kids and me reading it to the kids? A couple of differences. One, the screen reader is operable by the student. The student can choose where in the text to go, and the student can choose how quickly or slowly it's read. Can't do that so well with human readers, especially on the fly. Also, screen reader technology, the same technology that converts the text to sound, also converts it to something to a form that can be read by a refreshable Braille display, which is essentially a monitor for Braille. It displays Braille for the student to be connected to the computer or tablet. So read aloud is definitely not an appropriate accommodation. In fact, it's not an accommodation. It's a modification and shouldn't be used for students if at all possible. And Henley is the project coordinator for the Bridges Help Desk. And she has, as a blind, she went through the Baltimore school system and college at Villanova. and is now an adult and is blind and uses technology. And Henley, what other what are some other issues that occur with read aloud versus accessible text?
Yeah, so two of the things that I experienced when I was in school is we would have to go through questions, comprehension questions. And one of the things that was really difficult is, if something was read out loud to me, and I knew that there was, maybe the second or third or fourth sentence, something like that, was going to, had a piece of information in there that I wanted to quote while answering some of these comprehension questions. It's a lot easier for me to use my arrow keys on my computer or to use my Braille display to be able to skim around and find that exact quote myself, rather than trying to give directions to a human reader in order to find exactly what it is I'm looking for. So being able to find quotations and refer back to that text is extremely powerful for a student and will also increase the thoroughness of their answers. And in addition, one of the other things that I experienced was studying is a lot more difficult because my notes were not as thorough if I could not take direct notes or get direct facts and figures directly from the PowerPoint itself or from the presentation itself. So, human readers are definitely helpful in certain situations, but when a student is dealing with very technical material, it's really important to be able to engage with that text directly.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Henley. And something Henley said, this PowerPoint that I'm sharing now is not accessible. This is why Conchita made sure to send it to everyone who had registered by a certain time, and we'll send it to other folks. So screen sharing isn't accessible either. And that's another reason it's great practice to get into the practice of sharing PowerPoints ahead of time. Why must materials be accessible? Now we're here. Legally required, and it's not required just for students with IEPs. In fact, Maryland law in every state has statutes and regulations requiring accessibility in materials, and not just in K through 12, it's in everywhere. It's in college, it's at the library, it's at the courthouse. These are required things. And schools certainly are not, we're not exempted from that. Additionally, federal law, there are three in particular: Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, also the Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 508 of the Rehab Act also. All of these apply to all public schools. So it's required by law. That this may be helpful for you to, when you're trying to advocate for accessibility from the start, to let people know, other stakeholders know about the legal requirement. And frankly, it makes education possible. Educators create materials for a reason. If we didn't, we wouldn't be creating the materials. We'd spend more time doing something else. But we create these materials and it takes time, so it must be for a reason. Inaccessible materials do not provide faith, free, appropriate public education. Inaccessibility separates students from content. They are dealing with obstacles as opposed to interacting with the content. It also makes teaching inefficient because the materials you created for a purpose are not serving that purpose. It's unproductive. One can spend a lot of time trying to access content that is readily accessible to others. And it's really hard for a blind student to make an inaccessible document accessible, especially in the middle of class. Again, we're not requiring that of sighted students. We don't need to put additional burdens on a student with disability, especially when we're not allowed to anyway. So we want to be mindful of our time and, of course, of student time. Implications of inaccessible materials. We talked about frustration. We also don't expect blind students to be expert computer users. We don't expect that of sighted students. Again, let's keep the door open to everyone. That should be a kind of our mantra. We talked about wasted time, and Henley, what can share a little bit about wasted time and when students are having to troubleshoot their own documents to make them accessible.
So when I was in school, I was doing a lot of technology learning and doing what I needed to do in order to ensure that everything was accessible. And students who are blind or have low vision do have a lot of extra learning that has to go on. You know, they have to learn, you know, how to work their braille displays and how to work their computers with JAWS or Zoom text or whatever they might need. So the student is already kind of in a situation in which they're, you know, taking in their school assignments and their schoolwork, but they're also learning all of these extra things in order to manage that. And that's definitely doable. You know, that's kind of what part of being a blind or a low vision student is. But then dealing with inaccessible documents on top of that was very, very frustrating for me. And it ended up really impeding on, you know, I would spend my lunch times troubleshooting with this stuff, or mornings before school started when students would be in homeroom or be kind of gathered in the front lobby waiting for, you know, that first bell to ring or something like that. Things that we're not as familiar with right now because of this virtual environment. But I remember being, you know, in school and in person, and really just, you know, my friends wondering, you know, where I was, what I was doing, and just needing to put in all of this extra work on my school assignments to ensure that, you know, I was, you know, able to even access the documents in the first place. And then once I can access them, am I even able to type my answers in properly? And so that was really impeding, you know, with my ability to socialize and to meet people. It sometimes made it difficult for me to be involved in extracurricular activities because I would need to spend that extra time that I would have been spending outside of school catching up and making sure that all the technology was where it needed to be. So it definitely can really impede a young person who is blind or has low vision. It can really impede their ability to interact with all of the various facets of education. So, you know, while we're learning all these extra things about assistive technology, it really helps us out and really allows us to have a fuller, broader school experience if we have accessible documents that are going to work properly with our technology.
And this is Conchita. I just want to put in a note as well that accessibility isn't just for blind and low vision students. All of these practices that we shared in January and that are being shared again today are for all students with disabilities. So students who use switches, students who use voice dictation systems, all of these accessibility features also help all students with disabilities that are varying to be able to access information. And they also help students without disabilities who decide, you know, right now I'm going to listen to this, or right now I'm going to do it a different way. So, so just keeping in mind, it is especially important for blind students, but it also includes all students with disabilities.
Thank you, Conchita. And in fact, in a little bit, we're going to talk about one tool, well, one way that an accessible document can really be a boon for all students and frankly for teachers. So we'll talk about it in a little bit. With regard to the screen reader and screen magnifier users, Treva is not only a teacher of blind students, she is also blind herself. And what are some of the top problems individuals who are using screen readers? And again, maybe a person's using screen readers because of a learning disability, or they're using a switch control. There are many reasons they might be using this technology. What are some of the top problems for screen reader users and screen magnifier users? Treva.
Sure. One thing that happens for both screen reader and screen magnifier users is there is a lot of what we call like eye candy, like visual distractions in the PowerPoint. And often, so for example, if there's a decorative shape or something, it just says, JAWS will say something like graphic 2.555 and like some crazy number or letters and shape. And the student has no idea what that graphic represents. And I've come to have PowerPoints where the graphics are simply just decoration, and they have nothing to do with the text. And a lot of times what happens if you don't put your if you don't group the objects together, you have to go through like 10 objects before getting to the text you want. And that is what we're talking about when we're talking about a waste of time for screen readers. And for people with low vision, they might, it's frustrating to have to go through all that to get to the actual information. Um, the reading order is sometimes mixed up. If you mix up the reading order, you might read something before the other things on the screen are supposed to be read. Graphics are not, if they're not described, that's a problem in PowerPoints. This is especially problematic in social studies with math and with maps and also pictures sometimes of people take pictures of text and put them in PowerPoint. And this is especially problematic in tables and in science. So there might be a picture of an equation, and the way JAWS reads it, it says image. Image tells me nothing about that equation. And if it's a picture, your screen reader can't interact with it. So you don't know what that equation is trying to tell you. For also for people using screen magnifiers, contrast is often an issue if they can't read the text. That's a problem too. Color contrast that's important. Um, like I said before, the cluttered backgrounds, the busyness. Some sometimes there's blinky things. Um, that PowerPoints have on them that are visually distracting. And again, undescribed graphics. People with low vision also might not have they might not be able to tell what a graphic is because of the clutter.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So we can do this though. We can make this happen. But first, when do they need to be accessible? Legally, actually, they need to be accessible when they're first used with any students. Just like in a building, you do not have to have a wheelchair user in the wanting to get into the building before you need to build a ramp or an elevator. Put an elevator in a multi-story building. You don't have to wait. It is required whether or not there is an individual needing to use it right then. And the same is true with accessibility. Timeliness is very important, as is consistency. The best way to think about why it's important is, what if you randomly chose the name of one of your students, one student in the class, randomly chosen from a hat, and that student gets everything a week later than everybody else. But sometimes gets things on time. What kind of impact would that have? That's what happens with students who need accessible materials, who don't get them in a timely manner and don't get them with the same consistency that other students get materials that are accessible to them. The only problem is the accessibility needs to be accessible to all, not just to individuals without disabilities. It's best practice, and guess what? It makes your life easier. You don't have to always be under the gun. You can make it accessible from the beginning, and one more thing off your to-do list. It feels good. But how do I make presentations accessible? Of course, this is the meat of what we're going to be talking about. With PowerPoint versus Google Slides, address that first. PowerPoint is so much easier and better. PowerPoint, it's easier to create accessible presentations. Templates are already accessible. There are some in Google Slides, but in PowerPoint, there are a whole bunch that are already accessible. Accessibility is built in and user-friendly. And PowerPoint has a built-in and robust accessibility checker. We'll be playing with that really soon. PowerPoint also provides greater ease of use to the student user. It has Braille support. Google Slides doesn't, or at least it didn't last week when we were putting this together. And that's another problem. Google Slides goes back and forth. PowerPoint is pretty darn stable. Features don't come and go. PowerPoint has a lot of keyboard commands, so that a mouse doesn't need to be used. And there's a ton of information for JAWS users. JAWS is a particular screen reader. That makes it just that much more accessible. And the menus and ribbons are easy to use. We'll talk about that here soon. With Google Slides, again, red alert, no Braille support. And even if there is, there might not be next week. And we've talked about consistency. Now, that's very important. The accessibility of the product changes regularly. That's not good. That's not robust in our poor POUR. It's not robust. It's not reliable. That's a big, big problem. And sometimes commands that will stop working in the middle of a project. So you're working with it and everything's fabulous, and then the commands stop working. And there's nothing that you can do except refresh the page to try to get it to work. Refreshing the page, how big a deal is that? Well, it's frustrating when something is supposed to work and it's not, and then having to refresh the page or reload things is time wasting and not terribly helpful. It's just simply a more clunky tool, and there is no built-in accessibility checker. You have to get a third-party add-on. Well, problem with third-party add-ons sometimes is that they're not necessarily reliable. If you go onto the Google Play Store, you'll see that none has they're about in the 3.2 range for rank ratings, and sometimes we can't even add on things because our computers are locked down at school. So PowerPoint's the way to go. Please know if a blind or low vision student does not have access to PowerPoint, please contact the free Maryland Bridges Help Desk for advocacy assistance, because we would definitely love to help with that. We're also going to talk about best practices for all curriculum materials, slide presentations, specific issues, and talk about our lovely accessibility checker. Best practices for all. Use the automatic built-in list tools for lists. Ordered lists are lists like 1, 2, 3, or I, 2I, 3I, or ABC. Use those. They make life easier for you, actually, and they make it far more accessible. For unordered lists, those are bullets, check marks, etc. Same type of thing. Tabbing is better than spacing, than putting bunches of spaces in between. Use tabs. They help with the layout. And then other layout tools include things like the slide templates, text direction. We can talk about that in a little bit. If that's on the ribbon, it's home text direction, and you can arrow down to choose. You can have the text go sideways or upside down or all sorts of fun stuff. And there are key commands for that as well. And then align text, left, right, center, that type of thing. Use the tools, don't space and add spaces and such, because that's just, you're undoing something that's already done for you. Nobody needs to spend time on that. Best practices for all curricular materials, avoiding eye candy. Tree was talking about eye candy. Please avoid adding text boxes. This inhibits efficient reading. It can mess up reading order. Your best practice is to stick with pre-made templates. Do not use color to convey meaning. In other words, what is the meaning of the red word or underlined word or bold word? That type of thing doesn't, screen readers don't hear that, don't know that. Also, it can be problematic for your screen magnifier users. So colors to convey meaning, you can still use the color, but make sure you're conveying meaning as well in another way. Make sure that your colors provide adequate contrast. Yellow on orange, yike, uh, or even if I had black text on this PowerPoint with a kind of a gunmetal gray background, it's really hard to read for anybody. And if a person is trying to use low vision, which is not as useful as for typically sighted people, that makes it that much harder. Also, sometimes screen magnifiers allow the user to change colors, change the color setting because that's easier on their eyes. Sometimes if we put in funky colors, it can undo that tool that that student is using. And please, 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 please be aware of background when placing text in a document. We don't want text to run over pictures, which makes it really hard to see. Treva, would you talk to us about alt text?
Absolutely. Alt text is actually best practices for all curricular materials, not just for slide presentations. It's also important in Word documents and on the internet, and even if you're posting a picture to Facebook. Alt text is basically a description of the image, so that because otherwise the JAWS user will simply hear the word image or image with a bunch of letters and numbers or graphic. It's basically describing the graphics. Also, like for example, if you're using shapes, you should label those. We talked about decorative images. Use those sparingly, but definitely label those with the alt text. And any visual representations, you should group those together and put them at the end of the slide so that the JAWS user doesn't have to go through all that before they actually get to the important information in the text. Alt text, basically you can right click on an image and there's a place that says alt text, and you can actually create the alt text like that. You don't have to say, and when you write your alt text, you don't have to say this is a picture of. Just keep it short. It's got to be meaningful. For example, if you're doing like a map of the map of the continents, you might say map of continents showing, and then all the names of them. And if that's all that your map has on it, then that's what it is. Or a picture of globe. You wouldn't do picture of, but obviously you just say globe with all the continents on it. You want basically what I tell people, when the teachers that I work with, when describing alt text, you want to make sure that you give the same information in short as possible as sighted students would see the information that is relevant. So a lot of times I'll tell teachers of their subject area, put your own alt text in there because you know what you want the students to see and notice about this image.
Absolutely.
We talked about how to add it, and you just put right click or shift to F10 on the image and down arrow to add it. Is there anything else you wanted to add about alt text?
I think you did a fabulous job. You want to hit hyperlinks. I've scrolled down to hyperlinks now.
Okay.
So best practices for hyperlinks.
Okay. Yes, URLs are often not very clear. A lot of times people will not, you don't know really, especially when it says like click here, you don't really know. You might get in the surrounding context what it is, but sometimes it doesn't have. So when you are creating a hyperlink, again, use meaningful descriptions of what the link is in short. To add a hyperlink, there's a very easy key command. It's you select the text and you do Control K, or go to the ribbon and do insert link.
Perfect.
So for example, if you, okay, well, I was going to say, do you want me to give an example or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, like if you wanted to, instead of just putting the link in your PowerPoint to a video, and not describing, you could label the link as video to clip from Jane Eyre or something like that. And then your screen reader user is easily able to hear, it'll say link, and then it'll say video to clip from Jane Eyre. And that helps you. It helps everyone if to put a hyperlink in there and embed it. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
Some slide presentation specific issues. We have templates. We've already said use the built-in templates. It's going to make your life easier. You're going to see a little bit how it makes other tools, like I said, that everybody can really benefit from, work better. And they're there. Don't work smart. Don't work hard. They're really helpful for you. Titles, slide titles must be unique. Why is that important, Treva?
The titles?
Having every slide has a title and
Oh,
every title. Why are those two things
yes.
important?
Because you might not know, like a screen reader will tell you slide 7, slide 6, but you want to know what is going to be on the slide. You want it to be specific because again, we're trying to save time. We don't want a student to be like, where's that? And also each slide will have different information. I see teachers doing this all the time. They'll say notes about Africa, notes about Africa, notes about Africa. And it's like, no, these slides have different information, and it's important to label it like that.
Absolutely. Grouping. You talked about that earlier, Treva. What is grouping?
It's basically putting items together and to like so that you don't have to go through all of them when you're making your slide, when you're looking at the slide presentation. It helps the end user to just be able to skip some of those and putting them together.
Right.
Can you describe how somebody would do that? Because for people who are on this call, they may not know how specifically to do that.
Yeah, what you can do is you can select your graphics and then you can right click on them, and there should be an option to do grouping. So I don't know if it's something that we can show visually
We probably
at some
can
point.
show visually. Yeah. Let's see. We're going to get into a point fairly soon. We're going to start with some actual PowerPoints, and
Yeah.
we'll see what we can do to help group with those. And similarly, reading order. It's some of these things we're talking. This is previewing because I tend to be, and I think a lot of us are experiential learners. So we will be doing this together, but reading order is simply how the slide reads to it. If this particular slide says slide presentation specific issues, templates, titles, grouping, reading order, notes. If that were out of order, it might say grouping, notes, slide presentation specific issues, titles, templates, reading order. It's disjointed, and that's not fun. So, but it does really help to do it experientially, I think. And then notes. All PowerPoints have the ability to put notes at the bottom. Treva, how can that be useful for a student who's using accessible assistive technology?
The notes can help if you have extra information that you want to add. And you can, the notes are really easy to access for someone using screen reader technology. There's just a key command and you just access it. So if you have some extra information that you don't really want as part of your PowerPoint, like the extra little things we're talking about today, like maybe you're doing an accessible PowerPoint on PowerPoint accessibility and you want to describe what you can do, but in the notes you would put key commands, something, it just adds extra information. I think that is good for blind and sighted PowerPoint users because your screen is not cluttered up with the information, but it's still there, and it helps you to have that.
Excellent point. Next, accessibility checker. Again, we're going to be using this, and I think you'll like it. I really do.
Yes.
Accessibility checker is your friend. It helps you spot and fix issues early. How to do your accessibility checker on PowerPoint? There are a couple of ways. The key commands are Alt plus R at the same time, lift up, and then A and tap A twice. Or you can use the ribbon and go up to the ribbon. There's check accessibility, and it will give you a little box, check accessibility. You can also cheat like I do. I call it cheating. Maybe it isn't. And there on the top ribbon, there's tell me what you want to do. And it's Alt Q there. And you can just type in accessibility checker. Tell me what you want to do is a happy place for me. I like that tool because it will take you to those things. On Google Slides, again, it's not that easy. You have to download a third-party add-on. Workspace, I tried a couple weeks ago, didn't work at all. Grackle kind of worked, but it's clunky, and it's clunky to get to it. So I really recommend, we really recommend going with PowerPoint. You can always put a PowerPoint into a Google Drive and open up a PowerPoint in Google Slides. Again, it's not, the interface isn't quite as nice, but for you as the document creator, PowerPoint is good. It's nice, happy. How to remediate inaccessible slide presentations. Use accessibility checker. We'll show how to do that in just a second. You'll remediate with the same tools that you used in creating accessible presentations. Just in some ways, remediating helps teach you how to create them. And you'll probably deal with more issues when you're remediating than if you created it from the start. But it shows you how using those built-in templates and using these tools, remediating can really help make you a better PowerPoint presentation preparer. So we'll be doing that in just a few seconds. Practice with slide presentations. We're going to, of course, concentrate on PowerPoint. There is also a link there. We will hit on Google Slides a little bit. There's also a link here. This is a hyperlink put in to the PowerPoint. It's a hyperlink, and it says keyboard commands. That's a link to a PDF that has some keyboard commands. I've talked about those, and I'll just say again. Keyboard commands allow you to do from the keyboard what other people do with the mouse. I love keyboard commands because they keep my fingers on the keyboard, and they actually save time, and I don't have to try to aim for that darn ribbon or something. So I do tend to be a big fan of keyboards. And full disclosure, I am not a I'm not a touch typist. I wish I were. And I do have typical vision, but even not being a touch typist, I find keyboard commands so much nicer. I have switched to another slide we're calling slide play. And that's our practice with slides. We're going to help we're going to remediate slides. We're going to play around in PowerPoint with help from the accessibility checker. Slide titles. first things we're going to talk about are outline view, accessibility checker, and remediation. Outline view is something I just adore. And where's my lovely, there we are. This, I've just now on the screen, I'm sharing our presentation. It's the beginning of the presentation to make him take. And it's in normal view. And so on the left, there are little baby slides, all numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down the screen. But that's the normal view. What I'm talking about is the outline view. And let me show you how to do that. That is, I unfortunately can't do it right now because the screen share bar is right in where my ribbon is. So that's okay though, because I like my keyboard commands. It's Alt W. So the end, I have to hit Alt, make sure my computer doesn't hear it. So I'm at Alt and then W for view. The end of view is W. And then PO. As I hit, I'm going to go back again. I hit Alt. And when I hit Alt correctly, those of you who can see will see little letters coming up from underneath all of the ribbons. So you know which letter to hit if you can't get your mouse to the ribbon. We have W for view, and then across the ribbon, L is for normal, PO is for outline. So I just do PO quickly. Now I have an outline view. Now on my left-hand bar, it shows me an outline of the presentation. This is very cool because it's the dark, the bolded text, that's the title of the slide. So I can see my slides have titles. Yes, they do. That's really cool. And I can see the text in the slide. This is awesome. I can even see the hyperlinks. Life is good. The other thing that I can see, I can click into that outline view. There, I'm clicked in. I can do a Control A, which is copy, or select all. Control C, which is copy. And I'm just going to do a quick new document and Control V. And now all that outline view is now in a Word document. So I did Control A inside the outline view to select it all, Control C to copy it, then I opened a new Word document and I did Control V to paste it in there. Now I have an outline of this slideshow presentation. Could that be useful for a student in note-taking? Henley, Treva?
Yeah, it's a just text.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to worry about tabbing or anything like that. So, and you can add your notes in a Word document.
Right, absolutely. And this is something that, and the hyperlinks save. So it's really a pretty cool tool. And this is a great tool for all students, whether they're screen users or not, screen reader users or not. So outline view is pretty awesome for showing us that. It also helps when we're looking at what are some concerns in a slide presentation. I have up now diving deep for antonyms and synonyms and antonyms. This is something we got from Teachers Pay Teachers. Please know that the slides we're sharing, we are not bashing anybody. This is not a bash fest. Here are some things that are out there in the wild. Here are some ways to remediate issues if you get this. And it's a cute presentation. There's nothing wrong with it except that it's not accessible. So I'm going to do my outline view simply because I really like it. Wow. I haven't even used my accessibility checker and I see that we have a big problem. The problem is there's almost nothing in my outline view. Slide 5, it says a closer look, ... There's nothing else. That tells me that we're going to have a lot of untitled slides. And it also tells me that what's inside the slide. While it may be accessible, some things are, some things aren't. While it may be accessible, they're not, somebody didn't use the template from the beginning. They didn't use an accessible template. They added a lot of text boxes and did a lot of other stuff. Again, that's not necessarily an accessibility problem, but it's not as efficient as it could be. And efficiency is pretty awesome. Let's see. And so now I'm going to do my accessibility checker. And again, I can't get to the little arrow there. So I'm going to do Alt R. Now I can get to it. I can do A1A, or I can just click on it now. And this brought up my accessibility bar. It says I have, in my arrows, I have 28 instances of missing alternative text, 22 instances of missing slide title, and that makes sense because there's only one slide with the title and there are 23 slides, and 13 instances of check reading order. That's a lot. And we're not going to clean the entire slide up, don't worry, but we are going to work with it to show how we can clean things up.
Can I interrupt you real quick? There's a couple
Sure.
of questions.
Yes.
So the first one says, how can this process be completed in Google Slides, or can it?
Accessibility checker,
No.
it's not built into Google Slides. There are add-ons that sometimes work, and then sometimes they don't. And when Google Slides updates, what did work may or may not work.
Our other question is, how does one determine if a template is accessible before starting? So if you're using the already created templates, how do you determine if it's accessible?
If it's from PowerPoint, if it's in your PowerPoint program, it's accessible. That's just something they do. If you get it off the web, you may have to run accessibility checker to see if it takes you through. You may have to create it somewhat and then run accessibility checker and see, did it mess up reading order? Were there some funky things with it? But if it's from PowerPoint, it's going to be accessible. Thank you, great questions. So missing slide title, let's click on that fellow. And it tells me which slide is missing a slide title, that's cool. Slide 1. Let's see. My mouse doesn't want to show right now. I'm not sure why my mouse is doing this. I apologize. Okay, there he is. So sometimes you have to reload. So I clicked on missing slide title, and I'm clicking on slide 1, and it brings down a menu. It gives me some recommended actions. It gives me ways to fix this. How cool. It says set as slide title, add slide title, or add hidden slide title. Well, before I figure out which I want to do on this guy, I probably need to see what is going on in here. So if I click, I'm clicking on what really should be the title. It says diving deep for synonyms and antonyms. Then, I'm sorry, went down slide, 2 slides. So diving deep for synonyms and antonyms. There are other fellows in here. There's a rectangle here. Interestingly, the text isn't kind of in the rectangle. It says created by Teachers Unleashed. And there's another one at the very bottom left, copyright 2010, Teachers Unleashed. Okay. Well, which of these would be the appropriate slide title? I could do a couple of things. I could click on what makes sense, diving deep for synonyms, and I could click and say set as slide title. Now look over at my outline view. It says diving deep for synonyms and antonyms. Different lines, but it's fine. That's one possibility. I'm going to undo that. Another possibility is I could add a hidden slide title. This is really cool, and you may want to do this sometimes. So it might be Monday's ELA lesson. Maybe that's what I want the title of the slide to be. If I do that, if we look over my outline view, it says Monday's ELA lesson. Now, when I present this, WL, if I present this in a slideshow, I'll slide from the beginning. Guess what? There's no, we don't see that. So that is a hidden slide title. That's one way to fix that issue. Any questions?
Comment. It says, good to know. Thank you.
Great. Now we're going to drop down to heading 4, or slide 4, I'm sorry. And it says, before we can dive in, you need to understand what synonyms and antonyms are, exclamation mark. And it has some kind of picture-y things with some words on it and says, let's take a closer look. Well, let's look at our missing slide title. Slide 4. Yep, there's one. Let's see. What are our recommended actions? I might want to set as slide title that, that tells me something. Sorry about that. Let's see what our reading order is. We may have a reading. Okay. So slide 4, before we can dive in, we need to understand what synonyms and antonyms are. Maybe that's my slide title. Maybe I don't need to add one. That's pretty good. It's at the top, makes sense. So I'm going to set a slide title. So I didn't create a hidden one. I just said, what's here, that can be the slide title. That's fabulous. Now, I also see that I have some picture-y type things here, and that I want to check on that. And I know that we have some missing alternative text. So let's see if slide 4, okay, when I click down on my accessibility checker, it tells me I have 2 problem areas on slide 4. It has diagram 7 and 5-point star 4. I don't know where these names come from. Diagram 7, let's click on it and it's going to highlight it here. That's where we have a white arrow pointing from left to right toward a star. And on that white arrow are the word synonyms or words that mean the same. And on the right side of the star, there is a blue arrow pointing from right to left that has writing on it, antonyms or words that mean the opposite. That seems like pretty important stuff. And what the accessibility checker is telling me is that screen reader cannot read any of those words. That's not awesome. Let's see if we can make the screen reader read some of those words. When I highlighted it, it gave me a little box on the left edge. And the reason it did is because this was created by Smart Art Graphics. Smart Art Graphics are they're an option in creating a PowerPoint. But as we can see, Smart Art options are graphics and they need to have alt text added. The words you type in there are not alt text. They do not convey meaning to a screen reader user. But it means that I have to type less. I do see that the antonyms, which are on the right, are on top, and synonyms, which are on the left, are on the bottom. But what I can do is it says type your text here. I'm not going to change the text that's there. I'm going to copy it. I don't want to have to retype the darn thing. And now I'll get rid of that little box. And I'm in that diagram 7, and I can right click and arrow down to edit alt text, or I can tap Shift F10 and A for edit alt text. Great. Either one takes you to the same place. Now I have an alt text box. All I have to do is type in what I want to. So I'm going to Control V, type it in. And it says antonyms, next line, are words that mean the opposite. I'm going to make that one line because it's kind of one sentence. I'm going to do the same with synonyms. That's nice. Now, because synonyms are on the left, when kids are reading the slide, when I'm presenting the slide in class, I'm probably going to say synonyms before antonyms because we typically read left to right. So I'm going to copy, cut with an X, Control X, paste with Control V. Now my alt text is good. So this is good. This is so good that guess what? Accessibility Checker doesn't have diagram 7, slide 4 anymore. Accessibility Checker said we're good. But we do have another missing alt text in slide 4, 5-point star 4. Let me see what that is. Oh, that's that cute little blue iridescent-y star in the middle. Is this important for the slide? Is it important to know that there's a star in the middle of 2 arrows pointing toward it? We didn't mention the arrows in the alt text of the arrows. So that star, I'm thinking it's pretty much decorative. So how do I mark it decorative? Easiest way is to click and I can either add a description, which I did before, and clicking on the far right of the 5-point star 4 wording under missing alternative text in my accessibility checker. I can choose add a description or mark as decorative. I'm going to choose mark as decorative. It disappeared again. Yay! And now, because it's marked as decorative, it's not going to be mentioned to a screen reader. It's not there. If you talk about the star, you don't want to mark it as decorative. So I would undo what I just did. I would undo and I would add a description. If that star is important, I'm going to add a description to it. But, you know, I'm thinking that star really isn't important, so I can mark it as decorative again.
We have a question, and I'm not exactly sure that I'm reading it correctly, but it says, can you provide directions about how to add a PowerPoint into a Google Slide document to give to general educators?
Well, let me just show you. I think this might answer your question. I hope so.
And I think what might be helpful that I'm thinking about after the fact is the way we kind of provided a cheat sheet for Word documents
Right.
that we gave everybody. It would be, I think, helpful to have a cheat sheet for this so that we can just email everybody and they can kind of follow the steps. Because unless you watch this presentation from start to finish, I feel like it's going to be hard to remember all of the different parts.
Absolutely, yeah. And we do that keyboard commands, that link is in there that tells you how to do some things. But yeah, we can absolutely do kind of a recipe how to. Here is my Google Drive. So I have my Google Drive up now, and you see several PowerPoints, including ones we're going to be playing with. The one we were just playing.
All we're seeing, Carlton, is a blank screen on our end.
Oh, well, that's weird. Okay, let me see if I do this, because it was funny, it was letting me share before. So let's see if this doesn't share. Can you see anything here?
No, I think how you shared is you shared specifically to PowerPoint. So now that you're not in PowerPoint, it's not sharing.
Okay. I can tell you that if you can put the PowerPoint in a Google Drive and then open it, and it opens in Google Drive, but it opens as a Google Drive doc slide or Google slide, because that's the program you're using to open it. It does lose some features when you do that, but with this one, it doesn't. An accessible one really won't lose features. An inaccessible may lose some of those inaccessible features, but in order to, so if you do that, then you can actually save it.
We're still just seeing a blank screen.
I know, yeah. I'm just trying to. You can save as Google Slides. So again, put the PowerPoint into your Google Drive or into the student's Google Drive. The student opens PowerPoint, opens the document, and it opens in Google Slides.
So I found a workaround for people. So if you save PowerPoints into your Dropbox file, so if you, all of my folders for everything I do is under Dropbox, because no matter what, if I accidentally delete them, I can retrieve them. So if you save all the PowerPoint, if you have a folder for your specific student and you save it as Dropbox, then you can share that link with the student through Google Drive or through Google whatever. So if the student is in their classroom, they're using Google whatever, you can put the link there, and when the student opens it, it will open it as a PowerPoint presentation in PowerPoint because you've shared the link to Dropbox.
Oh, okay.
So that's a workaround where you don't have to put it into Google. You can leave it as a standalone PowerPoint. That way it keeps all the accessibility issues and your student has access to it. And you can set it up where you share it with them so they can edit it, or you share it with them so they can only view it without editing. So you can do that through Dropbox, create links and embed them into things in Google.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, that's excellent. That's a great workaround. I really want to just throw a few more things at you. We have slide 8 is it says the great jellyfish are very graceful and beautiful, and beautiful's in green. And then we have some jellyfish, some graphics of jellyfish on either side, and we have several words, both synonyms and antonyms listed. This one I want to show you because obviously we're going to have to title it. Obviously we're going to mark the
just so you know, we're still not seeing your screen.
Oh, that's not good. Okay, well then I'm going to stop share and reshare because it was doing it okay before. Oh dear. Here. Okay, come on, friend. Now are you seeing it?
Yes, and just to let you know, we are a little over time.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it was till 4:30. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're right. No, you're right. It is till 4:30. Okay, we can see your screen now.
Okay. I'm just going to run through this again. We need to make a title. The jellyfish, probably call them jellyfish because they're there for a reason. You could mark them decorative alternatively. Slide 8, we have a check reading order issue. So let's see. It's recommended actions, verify object order. Boom. Here's the thing that was really hard for me with reading order. We read from bottom up. So the first thing that's read is rectangle 1. I'm going to click on rectangle 1. That's the jellyfish are very graceful and beautiful. That's awesome. That's good news. Rectangle 2 is next. Gorgeous. Okay. Picture 3. Oh, now this is exactly what Tria was telling us about. We don't need pictures in the middle of our stuff, and that at best is decorative, or is just it's eye candy. But it talks about
this is where you could group the two decorative objects together and put them at the end of your slide.
Right. So
you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Let's see if I can group.
You have to select them both and then just Shift F10, and it should. You can't always group up, like you can't group
there it
text
is.
boxes together, but
group, and then group. And now it's group 3, pictures 4 and 3. I'm going to move group 3 all the way to the top, which means it's going to be read last. So boom. So we grouped, and then we changed the reading order. So now we're going from rectangle 1 to gorgeous. Oh, but now we're jumping over to stunning. So we had something at the far left. Now we have something at the far right. We have something toward the top middle. These rectangles are kind of going all over the place. That's not really cool because that's probably not it. Depending on how this lesson is taught, it might not be cool. If this were homework or outside, it doesn't matter what the reading order is. But if it's being read by the students or by the teacher, it would be great to have it in the correct reading order. I'm also going to just show something. This is not what I would want to do with this particular thing. Gorgeous is rectangle 2. If you look over in my selection pane, there's a little eye to the right of rectangle 2. I'm going to click on it. Now gorgeous disappeared, so it's not visible. It's still there, but it's not visible. So we can do that. I don't want to do that with gorgeous, but there we are. So that's how we can change reading order. And then the beautiful, we would want to add something to say that this is the word you want to, what we're trying to get an antonym or synonym for. I like asterisks. So I put an asterisk before and after beautiful. Some students don't like that. I think it's great to ask the student. But if it's that great jellyfish are very graceful and beautiful, and then you could just type beautiful again. That's the word we're looking for. Because that's important. We don't want color to convey meaning. And same thing in slide 22, we don't want, here's the, what the slide reads. When Wendy got on the boat, an 8-legged friend came with her. What is a synonym for the underlined word? How about, what is a synonym for the word friend? Easy fix. You can leave the underline. That's great. There are a lot of kids that's going to be really helpful for them. But we were able to change it and make it meaningful for everybody. That's what accessibility is all about. Any questions? It looks like there's one. Do you have a document outlining steps? Okay, and we will, Sherry, we will absolutely be doing that. I now come to a speech class because it has some interesting things. I'm going to do my Alt, maybe. All right. Alt, W, P, O. Yeah. Okay. Now, can you see the speech slideshow? Sharing again, I hope.
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. This one, I have my outline view. It's looking pretty good. I will do my accessibility checker and R, Alt R, check accessibility. I do have one missing alternative text and one duplicate slide title. That isn't bad. We can play with, we can fix that one pretty easily. For instance, if the fear of public speaking, I right click, I'll just edit the slide title. So that's pretty stinking easy. Missing alt text, content placeholder 3. That's in slide 6, transactional model of communication. Oh, this is a fun thing. It is a fancy little graphic. Honestly, the only thing I can read as a sighted person is transactional model, communication model at the top, title, and transactional model of communication in the middle. The other things are so stinking little. This is just kind of bad slide prep anyway. But one thing you could do is you can click on that graphic, do a Control C, go back to a new Word document, Control V, and then I'm going to enlarge that bad puppy so I can actually read what's on there, and then I will make my alt text with that. That's what that was to be good for. I guess you probably didn't see my Word, but I copied this graphic into Word, and then I could enlarge it and see what those teeny little letters are. In this case, frankly, the alt text would give a student using a screen reader a leg up because I'm not sure that anybody reading that could.
We're still seeing, somebody mentioned it. I didn't realize you were on another one. We're still seeing the scuba diving one.
Oh, blazes. Okay. Oh, Carlton. Share. This guy. Share. This is the one. This is the slide. It's the graphic. It's really tiny letters, bad color contrast. It's eye candy. It's really not terribly useful for anybody. So I can click on it, copy it to a Word document, figure out what's in there, type that up, and then I can add a description and add that alt text there. So that's how I would clean that fellow up.
This is an example of where if you're looking for some of these things, you realize, I think it helps people realize, well, wow, this won't work for sighted people either. And this is something I need to fix for everyone.
Right. I know we're short on time. I just want to show one more fellow. And this little fellow can be tricky on you. This is from a chemistry class. And the first slide doesn't look terrible. Let's see what our thank you. See what my outline order shows. Okay, at least we have some slide titles here. Let's see where our accessibility checker takes us. Oh, we have a ton, 138 instances of missing alternative text. We have a table with no header row, eek, missing slide titles, checking reading orders and duplicate slide titles. Let's see that missing alternative text. Oh, I thought it might have been this first page. This first page has a picture of some, I guess they're atoms, little rolly balls in a pyramid pointing down at a layer of rolly balls, or spheres. Okay, that's a better word. But it's not saying that it's missing alternative text. So let's see what that alternative text is there. Right click, edit alt text. Oh, Treva told us about this. 02-00CO. Is that helpful, alt text? No.
Not to me.
No, not for anybody. So I would either, if I think we'll discuss it in the presentation, I might do something. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to mark it as decorative. Because unless it looks like eye candy to me. But I would talk to the chemistry teacher and ask him or her, what do you think? Now, something else I see over here in my outline view, I see chapter 2, atoms and elements. That's fabulous. But it says in red print, homework to be completed before the end, blah, blah, blah. Why isn't that in my outline? It's not in the outline because somebody added a text box late. This is still accessible as you're reading through the PowerPoint, but this isn't going to help you if you want to use that outline view as a nice note taker. So
someone had a question. It says, is there a way to bring a Google slide into PowerPoint to edit for accessibility? Yeah, you can download. So in Google Slides, you can go to File, Download as PowerPoint. So then you can take whatever the teacher created and put into PowerPoint and then go through and do the accessibility checker to make and provide the student with the link so that they have it that way.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, and awesome. Sometimes they come out kind of interesting when you do that, but it would have the advantage of having the accessibility checker.
Yeah, so absolutely.
I think that in order to make them accessible, that's a good idea.
I just want to hit on this real quick. I know we're slow on time, low on time. Okay, missing. Oh, table has no header. We haven't talked about that. Let's look at that. Group 48, slide 3. Isotopes. It's talking about isotopes, and there's a table across the top: chlorine, number of protons, number of neutrons, mass number. Down, it's isotope 1, isotope 2. What am I going to do? How am I going to put a stinking header row in this table? Oh, I don't have to. I have a choice. I can use the first row as header. Now, if that, in this particular table, the first row as header makes some sense. It's telling me chlorine, and then it's isotope 1 or 2, the number of proteins, protons, and neutrons, and mass number for each of the isotopes. That looks like a really good header. So I'm going to click on that. And now it's not a problem anymore. Now it will read as the table header. If that didn't work, I would have to do some other remediation, but that's a really nice, easy fix. There are some, I've shared mostly I've shared what I care about at most. That I think that will at least get you started, and that will be meaningful and useful to you. I'm going to stop sharing.
And if you registered for this webinar, we will send out a cheat sheet that has all of this written down, because it is a lot to keep track of. I want to really quickly do our last poll.
Absolutely. Yep. And we've been answering questions all along. So
Yes, perfect. Okay, so this is gonna be anonymous, not shared, so don't worry. I just want to put that out there. So the first question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how useful did you find this webinar? 1 being not at all, 3 being average, 5 being excellent. And the next one is, will you use what you learned today in your practice? Yes, no, and maybe. And maybe while they're finishing doing the survey, if you want to talk a little bit about how they can reach out to the help desk if they do have questions.
absolutely. Please contact us anytime. We have a website and we have all the hyperlinks here. We have email. It's helpdesk@imagemd.org. We also have an accessible web request form. So it's a Google Doc. So Google is okay for some things. And you can just fill that out and shoot it to us and we can help you. We have a voicemail where you can leave a detailed message and we'll return your call. We also have a Facebook page and YouTube channel. So we want you to be able to get in touch with us. And at our website, we also have a blog, and it includes transition tips, weekly transition tips that we share on our Facebook page as well. For Treva, we have her email and her telephone number. Again, when you get this PowerPoint, this is all embedded in it as a nice hyperlink. So it looks pretty and it tells you where you're going and it takes you to the right place, which is all awesome.
And I'm going to copy again the link for your certificate of attendance into the chat box. And it also has the Maryland School for the Blind YouTube channel. So all of our videos are always posted on there. And you will get an email when this video is posted, as well with the cheat sheet with all of the information.
I know we threw a ton at you. But it's what I do think it will be better once you start doing it. And don't get overwhelmed. Do one slide at a time. Do one topic, alternative text, slide title. Those are your big guys. Reading order. Those are your big ones. So just take it one at a time. PowerPoint really helps support you. It really does. It not only tells you what's wrong, it gives you hints on how to fix it. How wonderful is that?
Thank you. Thank you, Carlton, Treva, and Hindley for joining us on this webinar. And like always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or anything else. People are saying thank you in the Q&A. Awesome. So thank you all, and we will let you know other webinars coming up that we will be working on.